Hi guys, welcome back to XMOLex. I told you guys that before I completely quit doing YouTube, or at least go on a hiatus, that I'm going to share the stories people have sent in about the current prophet, Russell M. Nelson. Because a lot of people were really excited about it, and I can't leave without finishing it. But before we get into the stories, I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who left such kind comments on my last video talking about how I am quitting YouTube. Everybody was just so sweet and supportive, and I really appreciate that because I really was worried that people were going to be upset about it, but everybody was super nice. So thank you so much. I also did want to say I will be posting some of my TikTok videos as shorts here on YouTube because a lot of people still don't use TikTok. So the ones that I can easily put on YouTube without, having to worry about copyright and things like that, I will go ahead and post them here for anybody who doesn't use TikTok. Which reminds me that some people were concerned that I was going to take the whole channel down. I'm not doing that. I'm leaving the channel up so the videos are still here, and anybody who, is going on their ex-Mormon journey and has questions can watch the videos and see everything that I've already put all this work into. It's not going anywhere, I promise. With all that said, let's get to your stories about Russell M. Nelson. And as always, these could be good, bad, or somewhere in between. I'm just sharing what people have said when they have had a chance to either see him in person or meet him in person. He came to my foreign Spanish-speaking mission around 2001 or 2002 and spoke at a special regional conference. When he got up to speak at the conference, he had a Spanish interpreter to help. After a couple of minutes, when he was about to start his actual talk, he told the interpreter to sit down. The interpreter was visibly shocked because Nelson didn't tell him ahead of time that he'd be doing that. The theatrics worked because the congregation of thousands was stunned as well. When Nelson began his talk in Spanish, I heard members seated near me say it was a miracle. That didn't sit right with me even at that moment because the most obvious assumption was that he knows Spanish well enough to speak it from prepared remarks. Upon reflection, it felt to me like he just wanted everyone there to think he was special and make them believe in the church even more strongly, but mostly just adore him. My mission is where I started to lose respect for both Nelson and Holland based on experiences listening to their talks in person. Holland's was in the MTC, where he rehashed a previous talk he had given but acted like it was an inspired, in-the-moment type of thing. I served my mission faithfully, but those experiences stayed with me all the way until I left the church nearly 20 years later. Oh, and I just discovered Nelson did the same thing with his interpreter more recently in 2018 in Peru. Apparently, it's a pattern. He visited my mission in Chile around 2014 or 2015 to give us missionaries a talk, a huge event for all of us, and for me, that I was about to meet one of the Lord's apostles. All the missionaries were gathered there, and when he arrived, of course, they made us all stand up. He decided to greet all of us one by one. I thought I'd feel something special when I shook hands with him, but nope, felt like shaking hands with a normal old man. Now, the part that irked me a bit about him was one of the Latino elders got emotional and hugged him instead of shaking hands with him, and Elder Nelson stood there, no reaction at all, as if he was a robot instead of a person, and kept greeting the other elders. I noticed then he was more enthusiastic with American elders than the Latino ones. He even hugged a few of them. Later, he gave his speech, don't remember what it was about. In one moment, he spoke to the American elders and sisters, told them, "You're all so beautiful," and then referring to the Latino elders and sisters, he said, "You too." And then I was like, why the different treatment? We are all here for the Lord. We're all siblings in God. Why? I've been thinking a lot about this thing I noticed. Maybe he greeted them more enthusiastic because they're from the same nationality, they speak the same language, I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, and also I want to give the benefit of the doubt, but I can't stop feeling that there was something off about his attitude towards us, the Latino missionaries. I worked at a ritzy resort waiting tables and fine dining back home in Hawaii on Oahu. Turtle Bay Resort is about 10 minutes away from BYU, Hawaii, so you can imagine why he was visiting the island. I will say, in hindsight, I am no longer surprised he was staying at such an expensive beach hotel instead of at one of BYUH's many rooms, meant for visiting speakers and temporary professors, etc. And yes, the church not only has on-campus housing for such situations, but also they own literally hundreds of houses in the area that they use for BYU staff. My family was forced to sell our house to BYUH via HRI Inc., which is the church's land management company there, by raising our property taxes astronomically. This was after they lowballed us with an offer first. They own most of the land in the North Shore and never sell. Anywho, so here is President Nelson, staying with the resort and eating fine dining with his wife. I thought I was so lucky to be serving the prophet because at the time I myself was a BYUH student. He was in fact very friendly, but had a kind of stiffness to him, like he had a good conversation with me but was always to the point and not relaxed. He asked about my schooling and what I was studying, asked me if I was married because I had my wedding ring on. I had to admit to him that I was indeed married but was separated at the time and likely getting a divorce. He didn't scold me as you would think a GA would do, but did say I should try to save my marriage because temple marriages are eternal, yada, yada, yada. Little did he know, my soon-to-be ex-wife had been unfaithful, and honestly, she just wasn't very nice to me or my family. I did heed his words and tried very hard to reconcile, but the funniest ending to the story is after I appealed her request to the church not to have our sealing voided, I received a letter signed by President Nelson that he would be approving the temple annulment and asked me to seek atonement for my sins and ask forgiveness from the Lord. That is bizarre to me. I married a Nevermo in 2011. My bishop decided to make him a missionary project. So he sent the full-time missionaries to invite us to a missionary investigator fireside. This was in Boise, Idaho. This was probably 2015 or so when Russell Nelson, who we lovingly refer to as Emperor Palpatine, was still a general authority. After the meeting was over, and because I was still physically and mentally out, we waited in line to meet him. The elders, of course, went with us because they were giddy little fanboys. Anywho, when we were face to face with the Great One, the elders introduced us, especially focusing on my husband's non-member status. I kid you not, Russell M. Nelson placed his hands behind my husband's neck, interlaced his fingers, and pulled his head forward so their foreheads were literally touching. In a creepy kind of low whisper, he asked my husband what his objections were to getting baptized, kind of a Mormon mind meld situation. It was awkward, strange, and just weird. After about 30 seconds of my husband saying, "What the fuck?" in his mind, he, my husband, gently pulled away and stated, "I have already been baptized and accepted Christ into my heart." Well, it's like the world stopped spinning for Russell Nelson, and he had to catch his breath, then replied with, "Not one of any consequence," meaning his baptism wasn't valid in the eyes of Russell Nelson. We should have left then, but we rode with our bishopric's second counselor. They talked for another minute about the Council of Nicaea, and we went on our way with a challenge to read the Book of Mormon and reconnect with the elders when he was done. I'm a fourth-generation Mormon descended from Wilford Woodruff, my fourth great-grandfather, and I can tell you that this was one of the most bizarre experiences I've ever had. Needless to say, 10 years later, he did not read the Book of Mormon or join the greatest cult on earth, and I resigned in 2022. Okay, what a very strange, rude thing to say to somebody. Even as, like, I don't know, even almost especially as a leader in the church, like, what kind of difference did you think that was gonna make to somebody other than like hurting their feelings? That's so strange of him to do. You know what's really funny? I have an iPhone and it updated recently and does this thing where all of my emails, there's like an AI overview of what the email says before you open it. And on that one, it says Mormon bishop's inappropriate reaction with this person's husband during fireside. And I love that it says that because she didn't even describe it anywhere that it was inappropriate. The AI just picked up that it was. Back in around 2019, he came to our ward to attend the blessing of his great-grandchild. I was in the bishopric, so I had the opportunity to meet him. I was expecting to feel something when I shook his hand, but I didn't. He, of course, also took the opportunity to speak during sacrament meeting. We tried not to make a big deal out of it, but word got spread around and a lot of people showed up. His talk was nothing special. In fact, I can't remember anything he said. After the sacrament meeting, the bishop asked him for advice. His only advice was that we should not be using wheat bread for the sacrament. He said that it should always be white bread. I was given the assignment to tell the member that was lovingly baking the wheat bread each week for us that her service was no longer needed, as she did not want to make white bread. He didn't say why, but it certainly made us all wonder. You know what? That's super funny because when I was growing up in the church, our neighbor across the street owned a bakery. And so we always used their bakery bread for our sacrament bread. And we used all different kinds of bread. Like sometimes it was white, sometimes it was wheat, sometimes it was sourdough. I'm pretty sure there was a time it was even like a cinnamon raisin bread because that's what they had. And I'm just very curious why specifically it needs to be white bread. I know that the church thinks that Jesus was a white man, and so does the body of Christ that's represented by bread have to be white bread because Jesus was a white guy? Like, I can't think of why else that would be necessary. That's so funny to me though. I have a few stories about meeting apostles. I have met Russell M. Nelson twice. Both times he was still just an apostle and not the church president. The first time was at a stake conference when I was about 16 and he was there to reorganize the stake presidency. I remember just being starstruck. He didn't say anything significant enough for me to remember. I did get to shake his hand and I was mostly impressed by how tall he is, but his pale blue eyes freaked me out a little, like he was staring through me and not at me. The second time I met Nelson was on my mission in Boise. He came to speak to the mission. He honestly didn't say anything uplifting, he just went on and on about the Greek roots and words in the gospel. It was interesting at first, but I quickly became bored. His random info spouting now seems very pompous in hindsight, like he was flexing how much he knew and how much us lowly missionaries didn't know. He was also very impersonal when he was shaking our hands. We were only allowed to shake his hand for about 30 seconds before we had to move on. We got to take a group picture with him, which I thought was cool. Overall, I'd say that my experiences with him were more on the positive side. He didn't come across as a jerk the first time I met him, but he is a little arrogant. I've also met the late Boyd K. Packer. He was in the temple when I was on a youth temple trip and stopped by to say hello to us. The man was deaf as a post, and we had to shout at him when he asked our names. My best friend was next to me, and he looked at her and told her she needed to smile more. It rubbed me the wrong way because we had to be up at 5 a.m. to get to the temple for our baptism sealing, so of course none of us would be smiling. He made some other rude remarks to the kids in our group, including poking fun at one of the boys' acne. I didn't like him since then, and reading more about what he did in some of the talks he gave just made me think that he wasn't a very good person. Yeah, that's super rude. All right, guys, that is all for today. I hope you've enjoyed this series, and be sure to check out the playlist that I made about it so you can see all the other ones. For me, David A. Bednar seemed like the worst, but I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are on that too. If I didn't share your story, please go ahead and leave it in the comments if you feel comfortable doing so. Thank you guys so much for your love and support over the years. Remember, I will be posting my TikToks here on YouTube as YouTube Shorts. But if you want to see more of what I'm getting up to, there are links for all of that in the description below. Thank you so much for being here, and remember that there's nothing that you're not worthy of. Bye!